A 22-year-old woman steps off the train in Wyoming, clutching a letter promising a new life. But instead of a husband waiting at the platform, she finds a telegram announcing his death and the deed to a sprawling cattle ranch she never asked for. Stranded 2,000 miles from home with winter closing in, Clara Whitmore must choose: flee back to poverty and shame, or face a brutal frontier that doesn't want her. One decision will change everything. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The train lurched to a stop with a shriek of iron on iron, and Clara's stomach dropped along with it. She pressed one gloved hand against the cold window, staring out at a platform that looked nothing like the drawings in the travel pamphlets. No cheerful depot, no flowering gardens, just raw timber planks, a few men in heavy coats, and wind that kicked up dust devils across empty land stretching to a horizon she couldn't see the end of. Her fingers found the letter in her coat pocket again. She'd read it so many times the creases had gone soft, the ink smudged in places where her thumbs had worried the paper. Dear Miss Whitmore, I am a man of means seeking a practical arrangement. I offer security, a home, and honest work. In return, I ask only for companionship and a steady hand to help build something lasting. Yours in earnest, Thomas Whitmore. Whitmore. The same last name. Distant cousins, connected by bloodline but strangers in every way that mattered. When her father's debts had piled too high and the creditors started circling, her mother had pulled that letter from a drawer like a last-ditch lifeboat. He's family, she'd said, voice brittle. He'll do right by you. Clara hadn't believed it then. She believed it even less now, watching a station hand wrestle her trunk off the baggage car while passengers shuffled past without a second glance. She waited, scanned faces. None of them turned her way. The platform emptied. The train hissed, ready to move on. Clara stepped down, heels clicking on wood that felt too solid after days of rocking motion. The air smelled like coal smoke and something else: dust, sage, animal, unfamiliar and sharp. Miss Whitmore? She turned. A man stood a few paces back, hat pulled low, shoulders broad under a canvas coat that had seen years of weather. He didn't smile, didn't step closer. I'm Clara Whitmore. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. He nodded once. Figured. You're the only woman traveling alone. He glanced at her trunk. That all you brought? Yes. She waited for him to introduce himself, to ask about her journey, to offer some reassurance that Thomas was simply delayed. He did none of those things. Instead, he picked up her trunk like it weighed nothing and started walking toward a wagon hitched to two dark horses. Clara followed because there wasn't another option, her skirt catching on rough planks, heart beginning to hammer in a way that had nothing to do with exertion. Excuse me, where's Mr. Whitmore? The man stopped, set the trunk down in the wagon bed with a thud that rattled the boards. When he turned back, his face was hard to read, not unkind, but not warm either, just careful. Dead. The word hit her like a fist. He took sick 2 weeks back. Pneumonia. Went fast. Clara's knees went soft. She grabbed the wagon's side rail, splinters biting through her glove. Dead. Yes, ma'am. But, her mind scrambled. The letter he sent for me. I came all this way. I know. The man pulled an envelope from inside his coat and held it out. This was waiting at the land office. Her hands shook as she took it. The paper was stiff, official. She broke the seal and unfolded it, eyes skimming words that didn't make sense at first. Last will and testament. Thomas James Whitmore. In the event of my death, all property, livestock, and holdings transfer to Miss Clara Whitmore, cousin and intended. I don't understand. He left you the ranch. Clara looked up. What ranch? The Double T. 3,200 acres. Cattle, horses, buildings. All of it. He paused. All of it's yours now. The platform seemed to tilt. She'd come here expecting a husband, a house, a role she could step into even if it wasn't one she'd chosen. But this? I can't run a ranch. I don't know the first thing about. No, ma'am, you don't. He said it flat, without malice, just fact. But you own it all the same. She stared at him, then at the will, then at the empty stretch of land beyond the station. Somewhere out there was a ranch. Her ranch. The idea was absurd. Who are you? Cole Rourke, foreman. He tilted his head toward the wagon. You want to stand here arguing with a dead man's paperwork? Or you want to see what you inherited? Clara's jaw tightened. She didn't like his tone. Too blunt, too assuming. But he wasn't wrong. She folded the will and tucked it into her pocket alongside the letter. I want to see it. Cole gave a short nod and gestured to the wagon seat. She climbed up, back straight despite everything, and he swung up beside her. The horses started without him needing to say much, just a click of his tongue and a shift of the reins. They rode in silence. Clara kept her eyes on the road, if you could call it that, more like a pair of ruts cutting through grass and rock, winding between low hills dotted with scrub. The sun sat heavy in the west, throwing long shadows, and the temperature dropped as they moved farther from town. How far? She finally asked. Hour and change. Another silence. She could feel him watching her from the corner of his eye, measuring. You got people back east? My mother, a younger brother. They know you're here? They know I left to marry a man I'd never met. They don't know he's dead. She kept her voice even, refusing to let it crack. I'll write them when I know what I'm doing. And what are you doing? She turned to look at him. His profile was all angles, sharp jaw, straight nose, eyes fixed ahead. He didn't look at her when he asked. I don't know yet. Fair enough. The hills gave way to flatter ground, and then she saw it. A cluster of buildings in the distance, wood and stone structures laid out in a rough square around a central yard. Barn, bunkhouse, corrals, and beyond them, cattle, dozens, maybe hundreds, scattered across grazing land that rolled toward mountains she could barely make out in the fading light. Cole slowed the horses as they approached. A few men drifted out from the bunkhouse, curious, wary. One of them, older, grizzled, with a limp, stepped forward. This her? This is Miss Whitmore, Cole's voice carried. The new owner. The man's eyebrows went up. He looked Clara over, slow and deliberate, and she felt the weight of it, not cruel, just skeptical. Owner. That's what the will says. Another man laughed, short and sharp. Hell of a thing. Cole shot him a look that cut the laughter dead. She's here. She owns it. That's how it is. He turned to Clara. These are the hands. You'll meet them proper tomorrow. Right now, you need rest. He didn't wait for her to agree, just climbed down and reached up to help her. She took his hand, rough, calloused, strong, and let him steady her as her feet found the ground. Her legs felt strange after so long sitting. Bunkhouse is full, Cole said. You'll take the main house. Where will you? I've been sleeping in the tack room. I'll stay there. He walked her across the yard, past men who watched without speaking, and up 3 wooden steps to a door that opened with a creak. Inside, the air smelled like old smoke and leather. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. A table, chairs, a narrow staircase leading up. Cole set her trunk down. There's a bedroom upstairs. Linens are clean enough. I'll bring in wood for the fire. Mr. Rourke, he paused, hand on the doorframe. Why did he leave this to me? We barely knew each other. Cole's expression didn't change. I couldn't say. Thomas didn't talk much about his reasons. He stepped back outside, then stopped. But he was deliberate. He didn't do things on a whim. The door closed, leaving her alone in a house that belonged to a dead man. A house that was supposed to be hers now, along with everything else. Clara pulled off her gloves. Her hands were pale, smooth, nothing like the hands of the men outside. She walked to the fireplace, ran her fingers over the rough stone, then turned and looked at the room. A rifle hung above the mantel, maps on the wall, marked and annotated. A ledger on the table, open to a page filled with numbers she didn't understand. She sat down, opened the ledger. The ink was Thomas's. She could tell by the way it matched the letter. Neat, precise. Columns for cattle sold, feed purchased, wages paid. It went back months. Footsteps on the porch. Cole came in with an armload of wood and built up the fire without a word, moving with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. Flames caught, and warmth began to push back the cold. You eaten? Clara shook her head. I'll bring something over. You don't have to. I do. He straightened, brushing bark off his hands. You're the boss now. That means you don't starve on my watch. He left before she could argue. Alone again, Clara stood and climbed the stairs. The bedroom was small, spare, a bed with a patchwork quilt, a washstand, a window looking out over the yard where lamplight flickered in the bunkhouse. She sat on the edge of the bed and pulled the will out again, reading it by the last of the daylight. Every word made it more real. The ranch, the cattle, the men who worked here and barely knew her name. She thought about her mother's face when she'd left, tight with hope and desperation. Thought about her brother, 16 and angry, watching creditors pick through their father's things. She'd come here to fix that, to marry a stranger and send money home until the debts were gone. But Thomas was dead, and there was no husband, and the only thing waiting for her was a legacy she didn't know how to carry. A knock. Cole's voice through the door. Bringing up a plate. She opened it. He handed her a tin plate with bread, stew, something that smelled like rosemary. She took it, met his eyes. "Thank you." He nodded, started to turn, then hesitated. "There's a meeting tomorrow morning. The hands will want to know what you're planning." "What am I planning?" "That's what they'll want to know." Clara set the plate down. "What do you think I should do?" Cole looked at her for a long moment, weighing something she couldn't name. "I think you should decide if you're staying or going. Everything else follows from that." "And if I stay? Then we've got a lot of work ahead." "We? I signed on to run this ranch. Thomas trusted me to do it. If you're staying, I'll keep doing my job until you tell me otherwise." His voice was steady, no emotion she could latch onto, just commitment. "And if I go? Then we sell it off, divide what's left, and you take your share back east." Clara crossed her arms. "You think I should go?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." A flicker of something, maybe surprise, crossed his face. "I think you're smart enough to know this isn't easy. That's all." "Nothing about this has been easy." "No, ma'am." He tipped his hat. "Get some rest. Morning comes early." He left and Clara ate alone, tasting nothing. When she finished, she washed her face in cold water from the basin, changed into a nightgown that felt ridiculous in this rough place, and lay down under the quilt. Sleep didn't come. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the wind rattle the shutters, and tried to imagine what tomorrow would bring. Morning broke cold and gray. Clara woke to the sound of men shouting in the yard, the clang of metal on metal, hoofbeats. She dressed quickly, her traveling clothes the only practical things she had, and went downstairs. Cole was already there, pouring coffee from a dented pot. He looked up when she came in, took in her appearance, and handed her a cup without a word. "They're waiting," he said. She followed him outside. The hands had gathered near the barn, 7 of them, maybe 8, all watching as she approached. Cole didn't introduce them, just stepped aside and let her stand there, exposed. The older man from last night spoke first. "Name's Dutch. I've been here since Thomas bought this place." His voice was rough but not hostile. "We heard you're taking over." Clara nodded. "That's right. You know anything about cattle?" "No." A ripple of reaction. One man shook his head. Another spat into the dirt. "You know anything about running a ranch?" Dutch pressed. "No." "Then what exactly are you planning to do?" Clara felt the weight of their stares. She could fold, she could apologize, admit she was in over her head, and let them take control. It would be easier. But she thought about the ledger, about Thomas's handwriting, methodical and careful, about the will that had named her specifically to carry this forward. "I'm planning to learn," she said. Silence. "I didn't ask for this. I came here expecting something else entirely. But it's mine now, and I'm not going to abandon it just because it's hard." She looked at each of them in turn. "I'll make mistakes. I'll need help. But I'm staying." Dutch studied her. "And what do you expect from us?" "Honesty. If I'm doing something wrong, tell me. If you've got a better idea, say it." She glanced at Cole, then back. "I'm not here to pretend I know more than I do, but I'm also not going to be pushed aside because I'm a woman who doesn't know a branding iron from a fence post." One of the younger hands grinned. "Hell, I like her." Dutch didn't smile, but something in his expression shifted. "All right, we'll see how it goes." He looked at Cole. "You're still running the day-to-day?" "For now," Cole said. "She learns. I teach. When she's ready, she takes over." "And if she's not ready?" Clara answered before Cole could. "Then I'll keep learning until I am." Dutch nodded slowly. "Fair enough." He turned to the others. "Back to work. We've got fence line to check before the snow comes." The men dispersed, some of them muttering, a few casting backward glances. Clara stood her ground until they were gone, then let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Cole finished his coffee and tossed the dregs into the dirt. "That went better than I expected. Did you think they'd refuse?" "I thought they'd test you harder." He looked at her. "They will eventually. Don't think that's over." "I know." He gestured toward the barn. "Come on. If you're learning, we start now." The next hours were a blur of information Clara couldn't process fast enough. Cole walked her through the property, showed her the grazing zones, explained rotations, pointed out fence sections that needed repair before winter. He spoke in a clipped, efficient way, assuming she'd keep up, and she did her best. But it was overwhelming, the scale of it, the complexity. Every decision seemed to hinge on a dozen others, and she had no framework for any of it. By midday, her feet ached and her head throbbed. Cole noticed but didn't slow down. "You're quiet," he said as they walked back toward the house. "I'm thinking." "About?" "Whether I just made a terrible mistake." He stopped, turned to face her. "You're going to feel that way every day for a while. Doesn't mean it's true." "How do you know?" "Because I felt the same way when Thomas hired me." He started walking again. "I didn't know him. Didn't know this place. Took me months to stop second-guessing myself. And now? Now I know the work. I know the land. That's all you need, time and repetition." Clara wanted to believe him, but time felt like a luxury she didn't have, and repetition implied she'd survived long enough to learn. They reached the house, and Cole pulled a folded paper from his coat. "This is the buyer contract for next month's cattle sale." Thomas was negotiating before he got sick. "You'll need to finalize it." She took the paper, scanned the terms. Numbers she didn't understand, conditions that seemed arbitrary. "What happens if I don't?" "We lose the sale, and we need that sale to cover winter expenses." Her stomach tightened. "So I don't have a choice." "You've got a choice. You just won't like the alternatives." Clara looked up at him, searching for reassurance, for some sign that this would get easier. His face gave her nothing. "I'll read it tonight," she said. "We'll talk tomorrow." He nodded and left her there, standing on the porch with a contract she couldn't afford to misunderstand. Inside, she spread the paper on the table and tried to make sense of it. The language was dense, full of terms she'd never heard. She cross-referenced the ledger, found earlier sales, compared prices. It took hours, but slowly, painfully, patterns emerged. By the time the sun set, she'd made notes in the margins, questions to ask Cole, terms she thought might be negotiable. Her hand cramped. Her eyes burned, but she understood it, not perfectly, but enough. She ate alone again, bread and cheese Dutch had left by the door, and climbed the stairs as lamplight flickered in the bunkhouse across the yard. Lying in bed, Clara stared at the dark ceiling and thought about everything she'd left behind. Her mother, her brother, the narrow streets of a town she'd known her entire life. And she thought about what lay ahead. A ranch she didn't know how to run, men who doubted her, decisions that could ruin everything. But beneath the fear, something else stirred, something stubborn and sharp. She hadn't come this far to give up at the first obstacle. She'd figure it out. One day, one choice, one mistake at a time. And she'd prove, to them, to herself, that she belonged here, even if she had to bleed for it. The first snow came early, 3 weeks after Clara's arrival. She woke to find the world transformed, white and silent, the mountains obscured by low clouds that promised more to come. She dressed in layers, wool stockings under her skirt, a shawl over her blouse, and went downstairs to find Cole already stoking the fire. "We're moving the herd to lower pasture," he said without preamble. "Today." Clara poured herself coffee, hands wrapped around the cup for warmth. "Why today?" "Because if we wait, we'll lose half of them in drifts." He looked at her. "You're coming." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "All right." Outside, the hands were already saddling horses. Dutch saw her approaching and jerked his chin toward a gray mare tied near the fence. "That's Ash. She's got a solid temperament. Won't spook easy." Clara approached the horse slowly, running her hand along its neck. The mare's breath came out in white puffs, eyes calm and watchful. She'd ridden exactly 3 times in her life, all of them in the last 2 weeks under Cole's critical eye, and none of them had felt natural. "Need help?" one of the younger hands called. His name was Jesse, and he had a crooked smile that made him look younger than he probably was. "I can manage," Clara said, reaching for the saddle horn. She got her foot in the stirrup and hauled herself up, less graceful than she wanted but functional. The mare shifted beneath her and Clara tightened her grip on the reins. Cole swung onto his own horse, a big black gelding with a white blaze. "Stay close. If you fall behind, stop and wait. Don't try to catch up on your own." "I won't fall behind." He gave her a look that said he'd heard that before, then turned his horse toward the open range. The others followed, and Clara nudged Ash forward, settling into the unfamiliar rhythm of movement. They rode for nearly an hour before they reached the main herd. The cattle were scattered across a wide basin, dark shapes against white ground, their breath rising like steam. Cole raised his hand, and the group fanned out, each rider taking a section. "Push them south," Cole called to Clara. "Don't rush. Let them move at their own pace." She nodded and guided Ash toward the nearest cluster of cattle. They lifted their heads as she approached, suspicious but not spooked. She moved wide, giving them space, and they began to shift, ambling in the direction she wanted. It seemed simple at first, almost meditative. But then the wind picked up, carrying fresh snow in horizontal sheets that stung her face and made it hard to see more than a few yards ahead. The cattle balked, some of them turning back, and Clara had to circle around, cutting them off, forcing them to rejoin the group. Her hands went numb inside her gloves. Her face burned from the cold. But she kept moving, kept pushing, watching how Dutch and Jesse worked and trying to mirror their movements. A steer broke away, heading for a rocky outcrop. Clara turned Ash and went after it, urging the mare into a faster pace. The ground was uneven, snow covering hidden stones and ruts, and she felt the horse hesitate. "Come on," Clara muttered, squeezing with her knees. Ash responded, closing the distance. Clara swung wide, cutting the steer off before it could reach the rocks. It turned, annoyed, and trotted back toward the herd. When she looked up, Cole was watching from across the basin. He didn't wave or signal approval, just turned back to his own section. But something in the way he'd looked told her she'd done it right. By the time they got the herd settled in the lower pasture, the sun was dropping behind the mountains, and the temperature had fallen even further. Clara's legs shook as she dismounted, and she had to grab the saddle to steady herself. Dutch rode up beside her. Not bad for someone who didn't know which end of a horse to feed. She managed a tired smile. "I'm still not sure I do." He laughed, short and rough. "You'll figure it out. Just keep showing up." The ride back was slower, quieter. The hands were tired, faces red from wind and cold, and no one wasted energy on conversation. Clara let Ash follow the others, too exhausted to do more than hold on. When they finally reached the ranch, she slid off the horse and nearly collapsed. Her legs didn't want to hold her. Cole appeared at her elbow, steadying her with one hand. "Easy. I'm fine." "You're not. But you did the work." He took Ash's reins. "Go inside. I'll handle the horses." Clara wanted to argue, to prove she could finish what she started, but her body had other ideas. She nodded and stumbled toward the house, every muscle screaming. Inside, she peeled off her wet clothes and stood by the fire until feeling returned to her fingers. Then she collapsed into a chair and stared at nothing, too tired to think. A knock at the door. She didn't have the energy to get up. "It's open." Cole came in carrying a plate of food and a bottle of something amber. He set them on the table. "Eat. Then drink some of this. It'll help." "What is it?" "Whiskey." She raised an eyebrow. "Medicinal," he added, deadpan. Clara ate because he was right. She needed it. The food was simple, some kind of meat stew and hard bread, but it tasted better than anything she'd had in weeks. When she finished, she poured a small measure of whiskey into a cup and sipped. It burned going down, but warmth spread through her chest. Cole sat across from her, his own cup in hand. For a moment, they didn't speak. "You did well today," he finally said. "I barely kept up." "You kept up. That's what matters." He took a drink. "Most people would have quit after the first hour." "I thought about it." "But you didn't." She met his eyes. They were dark in the firelight, unreadable. "No, I didn't." He nodded, as if that confirmed something he'd suspected. Then he stood. "Get some sleep." Tomorrow we're fixing fence line. Of course we are. A flicker of something that might have been a smile crossed his face, gone before she could be sure. Welcome to ranching, Miss Whitmore. After he left, Clara sat alone, nursing the whiskey and watching the fire burn low. Her body ached. Her hands were blistered. But beneath the exhaustion, something else had taken root, a stubborn satisfaction that she'd survived the day. She climbed the stairs and fell into bed fully clothed, asleep before her head hit the pillow. The days that followed blurred together into a relentless rhythm of work. Fence repairs in freezing wind, hauling feed to cattle that had worn through the grazing, checking water sources that froze overnight and had to be broken open with axes. Clara threw herself into it all, learning through repetition and failure. She made mistakes, plenty of them. She misjudged distances, forgot tools, pushed herself too hard, and had to stop mid-task to catch her breath. The hands noticed, but they stopped commenting. Slowly, grudgingly, they started treating her less like an outsider and more like someone who might actually belong. Dutch became her unlikely teacher in the practical matters Cole didn't have time for. He showed her how to read weather signs in the sky, how to tell when a cow was sick just by the way it stood, how to sharpen a blade properly so it wouldn't dull after 2 cuts. You got a decent head on your shoulders, he told her one afternoon as they mended a section of fence. Just got to trust it more. I don't know enough to trust it. None of us did when we started. You think Cole came out here knowing all this? Dutch hammered a nail into place. He was greener than you, just didn't show it as much. Clara glanced toward where Cole was working with Jesse on the far side of the pasture. Hard to imagine. That's because he's good at what he does now. Give yourself time. You'll get there. She wanted to believe that, but time felt like it was running out. The cattle sale Cole had mentioned was only 2 weeks away, and she still didn't fully understand the contract she was supposed to finalize. That night, she spread the paperwork across the table again and forced herself to focus. The buyer, a man named Garrett from Cheyenne, had proposed terms that seemed fair on the surface, but something about the delivery schedule bothered her. The timing would require moving cattle in the worst part of winter, and the price didn't seem to account for the risk. She made notes, drew up alternative proposals. By the time Cole came in the next morning, she had 3 different versions laid out. He looked them over in silence, his expression unreadable. You think Garrett will accept any of these? Clara asked. No. Her heart sank. Then what's the point? The point is you're thinking like a rancher instead of someone desperate to make a sale. He tapped one of the proposals. This one's close. Adjust the delivery window, and I think we've got leverage. Leverage for what? Better terms. Garrett needs cattle as much as we need buyers. He'll negotiate if he thinks we're serious. Clara stared at the paper. How do you know? Because Thomas dealt with him for 3 years, and the man's consistent. He pushes, you push back, and you meet somewhere in the middle. Cole looked at her. But you have to be willing to walk away if he won't budge. That's the part most people can't do. And if we walk away and don't find another buyer, then we're in trouble. But we won't be in worse trouble than if we take a bad deal that costs us more than it's worth. She nodded slowly, absorbing that. All right, I'll make the changes. Good. He started to leave, then paused. You're getting better at this. It was the closest thing to praise she'd heard from him, and it landed harder than she expected. Over the next week, Clara refined the proposal until she was satisfied it represented the best deal she could make without giving away too much. Cole reviewed it one last time, made a single correction, and handed it back. Send it to Garrett. Tell him you'll be in Cheyenne next week to finalize. Clara blinked. Me? You're the owner. You finalize the deals. Cole, I can't walk into a room full of cattle buyers and, yes, you can. His voice was firm. You know the numbers, you know what we need, and you know what we won't accept. That's all you need. They won't take me seriously. Probably not. At first, he leaned against the table. But if you back down, they never will. And then every deal after this gets harder. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she wasn't ready, that this was too much, too fast. But she knew he was right. If she let Cole or Dutch handle this, she'd be proving every doubt the hands had ever had about her. When do I leave? 3 days. I'll ride with you as far as the station, but after that, you're on your own. Clara's stomach twisted. Wonderful. The next 3 days were a scramble to prepare. She went over the proposal until she could recite the terms in her sleep. She practiced responses to objections she thought Garrett might raise. She even asked Dutch what she should wear, which made him laugh so hard he nearly choked. "Just don't show up looking like you're headed to a church social," he said. "These are cattlemen. They'll respect practicality over frills." On the morning she was set to leave, Clara dressed in her simplest traveling suit, pinned her hair back tight, and went downstairs to find Cole waiting with the wagon. The ride to the station was quiet. Cole didn't offer reassurances or last-minute advice. He just drove, eyes on the road, and Clara was grateful for the silence. Her nerves were wound tight enough without conversation. When they reached the platform, he handed her down and pulled her bag from the wagon bed. "You've got the proposal?" She patted her satchel. "Right here." "And the ledger copy?" "Yes." He nodded. "Then you're ready." Clara looked at him, searching for something, encouragement maybe, or confidence she didn't feel. But his face was as guarded as ever, giving nothing away. "What if I mess this up?" "Then you'll learn from it and do better next time." He adjusted his hat. "But you won't mess it up." "How do you know?" "Because you don't quit, and that's half the fight." The train whistle sounded in the distance. Clara took a breath, picked up her bag, and walked toward the platform. She didn't look back. Cheyenne was bigger than she'd expected, sprawling and loud, full of people who moved with purpose. Clara checked into a modest hotel, washed the dust from her face, and reviewed her notes one more time before heading to the address Garrett had provided. The building was plain, functional. Inside, a clerk directed her to an office on the second floor. She climbed the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last, and knocked. "Come in." She opened the door. The room was dominated by a large desk covered in papers, maps, and ledgers. Behind it sat a man in his 50s, thick-built with a gray beard and sharp eyes that took her in with a single sweep. "Mr. Garrett?" "That's right." He didn't stand. "And you are?" "Clara Whitmore. We corresponded about the cattle sale." His eyebrows rose. "You're Clara Whitmore?" "I am." He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "I was expecting Thomas. Or his foreman. Thomas is dead. I own the ranch now." Garrett's expression didn't change, but she saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. "My condolences. Thomas was a good man." "Thank you." "So you're here to finalize the terms?" "I'm here to negotiate better ones." That got a reaction. Just a twitch at the corner of his mouth, but it was there. "Is that so?" Clara opened her satchel and pulled out the proposal, setting it on his desk. "The terms you offered don't account for the risk of moving cattle in deep winter. I'm proposing an adjusted delivery schedule and a price increase to offset the additional costs." Garrett picked up the paper, scanned it, and set it down. "This is a 5% increase." "Yes." "That's not happening." "Then we won't make the sale." He laughed, not mockingly, but genuinely surprised. "You'd walk away." "If the deal costs me more than it's worth, yes." Garrett studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled out a different set of papers and slid them across the desk. "Counterproposal. 3% increase, original delivery schedule, but I cover half the transport costs." Clara read through it quickly. The math was better than she'd expected. Not perfect, but workable. 3.5%. You cover 2/3 of transport, and we adjust the delivery window by 1 week. Garrett's smile widened. "You always this stubborn?" "Only when I need to be." He considered, then picked up a pen and made notes on the contract. 3.5. 2/3 transport, 1 week adjustment. He looked up. "But I want first option on your spring calves." Clara hesitated. That was new territory. "At what price?" "Market rate. Same terms we just agreed on." She thought about the spring herd, what Cole had said about planning ahead. "First option, but not exclusive. If you don't meet market rate, I can sell elsewhere." "Fair enough." He extended his hand. "We've got a deal, Miss Whitmore." She shook it, his grip firm and dry. "We do." Garrett pulled out a proper contract and began filling in the terms they'd agreed on. As he wrote, he spoke without looking up. "You handled yourself well, better than I expected." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just keep doing it. Plenty of men in this business will try to take advantage. Don't let them." "I won't." He finished the contract, signed it, and slid it across for her signature. Clara read through every line, checked the numbers twice, then signed her name. Her hand shook slightly, but the signature was clear. Garrett blotted the ink and handed her a copy. Pleasure doing business with you. Likewise. She left the office feeling lighter than she had in weeks. The deal was done. Better than she'd hoped. And she'd done it herself. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the street in shades of orange and gold. Clara walked back to the hotel, booked a room for the night, and allowed herself one small moment of satisfaction before the exhaustion hit. She ate dinner alone in the hotel dining room, a steak that was too tough and potatoes that were too salty, but it didn't matter. She'd survived her first real test. The next morning, she caught the early train back. The journey felt shorter somehow, the landscape less intimidating. When the train pulled into the station, Cole was waiting with the wagon. He didn't ask how it went, just loaded her bag and started driving. Clara let the silence stretch for a mile before she spoke. I got 3.5% above his original offer, 2/3 transport coverage, and a delivery window that won't kill us. Cole's expression didn't change. And the spring calves? First option at market rate, but not exclusive. He nodded. That's good? That's all? Just good? What do you want, a medal? Clara laughed despite herself. Maybe a little enthusiasm. You did what needed doing. That's the job. But there was something in his tone, approval, maybe, or respect. She'd take it. When they reached the ranch, Dutch and a few of the hands were waiting in the yard. Dutch stepped forward, arms crossed. Well? We've got a deal, Clara said. A cheer went up. Jessie clapped her on the shoulder hard enough to make her stumble. Even Dutch smiled. Drinks on the boss tonight, someone called, and Clara didn't have the heart to argue. That evening, the hands gathered in the bunkhouse, passing around a bottle of whiskey and swapping stories. Clara sat on a bench near the stove, listening more than talking, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she felt like part of something. Cole stayed on the edges, as usual, but when their eyes met across the room, he raised his cup slightly. A salute. She returned it. Later, after the others had drifted off to sleep, Clara walked back to the main house under a sky so full of stars it hurt to look at. The air was freezing, sharp enough to burn her lungs, but she didn't hurry. Inside, she built up the fire and sat at the table with the signed contract in front of her. She traced her name with one finger, still not quite believing it was real. A knock at the door. Cole, again. Thought you'd be asleep by now, she said. Could say the same. He stepped inside, closed the door against the cold. Wanted to make sure you knew what you did today mattered. The men saw it. They're talking about it. What are they saying? That maybe you'll work out after all. He paused. For what it's worth, I think they're right. Clara looked at him, really looked. He was still guarded, still careful. But there was something different in the way he stood, less wary. Thank you, she said quietly. He nodded, started to leave, then stopped. Storm's coming in tomorrow. Big one. We'll need to make sure the livestock are secured. I'll be ready. I know. After he left, Clara sat alone for a while longer, watching the firelight dance on the walls. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters and promising the storm Cole had predicted. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She'd proven she could do this. Not perfectly. Not without help. But she could do it. And that was enough. The storm Cole had predicted hit 2 days later with a violence that made the earlier snowfall look gentle. Clara woke to wind so loud it sounded like the house was being torn apart, board by board. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to find him already there, pulling on heavy gloves. Cattle are scattered, he said without looking up. We need to bring them in before they freeze or get buried. How scattered? 1/2 mile in every direction, maybe more. He finally met her eyes. This is going to be bad. They worked through the morning in conditions that made Clara's hands go numb within minutes despite the gloves. The wind drove snow sideways, cutting visibility to almost nothing. She could barely see Cole when he was 10 feet away, and more than once she lost sight of the cattle she was trying to herd and had to backtrack, shouting into the wind until she found them again. Dutch appeared out of the white chaos, his face raw and red. Lost 3 head in a ravine. Can't get them out in this. Cole swore under his breath. Mark the location. We'll come back when it clears. If it clears, Dutch muttered, but he rode off. By afternoon, Clara's entire body felt like one massive bruise. Her legs shook every time she dismounted. Her face burned from the cold and wind. But they kept pushing, kept searching, until finally Cole called it. "That's all we can do," he shouted over the storm. "Get back to the ranch." The ride back was the longest of Clara's life. Ash struggled through drifts that came up to her chest, and twice Clara had to dismount and lead the mare by hand, sinking knee-deep with every step. When the buildings finally came into view, she wanted to cry with relief. Inside the barn, the hands worked in grim silence, tending to the horses and checking the cattle they'd managed to save. Clara helped where she could, but her hands weren't working right, clumsy and slow, dropping things. "Go inside," Cole said, taking a brush from her stiff fingers. "You're no use like this." She wanted to argue, but he was right. She stumbled to the house, barely made it through the door before collapsing into a chair. Her teeth chattered so hard she couldn't stop them. The fire had gone out. She stared at it, knowing she should rebuild it, but her body wouldn't move. The door opened. Cole came in carrying an armload of wood. He didn't say anything, just built up the fire with efficient movements, added kindling, coaxed it to flame. When it was burning strong, he pulled a chair close and sat her in it, then draped a blanket over her shoulders. "Don't fall asleep yet," he said. "You need to warm up first." Clara nodded, still shaking. He disappeared and returned with the whiskey bottle, poured a measure into a cup and pressed it into her hands. She drank, coughing at the burn. "How many did we lose?" she managed. "Don't know yet. We'll count when the storm passes." He sat across from her, his own cup in hand. "Could have been worse?" "Doesn't feel like it." "No, doesn't." He drank, then looked at her. "You held up." "Barely. Barely's enough." They sat in silence, listening to the wind rage outside. Clara's shaking gradually subsided as warmth seeped back into her bones. Her face tingled painfully as sensation returned. "How long will this last?" she asked. "Day, maybe 2. And then?" "We dig out, count losses, fix what broke." He paused. "Same as always." Clara pulled the blanket tighter. "Does it ever get easier?" "No, you just get tougher." She wanted to ask how much tougher she'd need to become, but she already knew the answer, however much it took. The storm raged for 36 hours. Clara spent most of it inside, pacing when she had the energy, staring at the fire when she didn't. Cole came and went, checking on the men and the livestock, bringing her food she barely tasted. On the second night, he didn't leave. "Bunkhouse is overcrowded," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "I'll sleep here." "There's a spare bedroom upstairs." "I'm fine here." Clara didn't argue. The truth was she didn't want to be alone. The wind had a way of getting inside her head, making everything feel more fragile than it was. They talked in fragments, about the ranch mostly, the work that would need doing when the storm passed, but sometimes about other things, where they'd come from, what they'd left behind. Cole was sparse with details, but Clara pieced together a picture of a man who'd been drifting for years before Thomas had hired him, working cattle drives and temporary jobs, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. "Why'd you stay here?" she asked. He was quiet for a long time. "Thomas gave me a reason to. Said he was building something that would last, and he needed people who'd stick around to see it through." He stared at the fire. "Seemed worth trying. And now? Now I'm seeing it through." Clara understood what he wasn't saying. He'd made a promise to Thomas, and he wasn't the kind of man who broke promises, even to the dead. "I'm glad you stayed," she said quietly. He looked at her then, something shifting in his expression. "So am I." The moment hung between them, heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. Then Cole stood, breaking it. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be brutal." He was right. When the storm finally cleared and they went out to assess the damage, it was worse than Clara had feared. They'd lost 8 head of cattle, 3 horses, and half the fence line on the north pasture. The barn roof had a hole where a branch had punched through, and 2 of the water troughs had cracked from the cold. The men moved through the wreckage with weary determination, salvaging what they could. Clara worked alongside them, her hands blistered and aching, refusing to stop even when Dutch suggested she take a break. "We've all got the same amount of daylight," she said. "I'm not wasting mine sitting down." He grunted approval and handed her a hammer. It took 3 days to make the repairs that couldn't wait. 3 days of brutal, grinding work that left Clara so tired she fell asleep before she could finish eating dinner. But slowly, The ranch started to look functional again. On the fourth day, a rider appeared on the horizon. Clara was in the barn helping Jesse mend tack when Dutch called out, "Someone's coming!" They went outside. The rider was moving fast, kicking up snow. As he got closer, Clara recognized him. One of the hands from a neighboring ranch, a kid named Tom who couldn't be more than 17. He pulled up hard, his horse lathered and breathing heavy. "Miss Whitmore?" "That's me." "Got a message from Mr. Garrett in Cheyenne. He needs you there in 2 days. Says it's urgent about the cattle deal." Clara's stomach dropped. "What's wrong with the deal?" "Didn't say. Just said it's urgent." Tom pulled an envelope from his coat and handed it down. "He paid me to make sure you got this fast." Clara broke the seal and read quickly. The letter was short, Garrett's handwriting tight and hurried. "Problems with the buyer. Need to renegotiate terms immediately. Can't do it by letter. Come to Cheyenne." She looked up at Cole, who'd come out of the barn. "Garrett needs me in Cheyenne. 2 days." "What happened?" "He doesn't say. Just that the deal's in trouble." Cole's jaw tightened. "Could be anything. Market shift, buyer backing out, transport issues. Can we afford to lose this sale?" "No." Clara folded the letter. "Then I'm going." "Not alone." Cole turned to Dutch. "You're in charge while we're gone. Keep the men working on the north fence. If anything happens—" "I know what to do," Dutch interrupted. "Go, fix the deal." Clara went inside to pack, her mind racing. Everything they'd worked for hinged on this sale. If it fell through, they'd be in serious trouble. No income meant no way to pay wages, buy feed, or maintain the ranch through the rest of winter. She packed quickly, practical clothes, the ledger, copies of the contract. When she came back out, Cole had the wagon ready and 2 horses saddled. "We're riding?" Claire asked. "Faster than waiting for the train. If we push hard, we can make Cheyenne by tomorrow night." He tied her bag to his saddle. "You up for it?" Clara thought about her aching body, the exhaustion that hadn't fully left since the storm. Then she thought about what would happen if they didn't make it in time. "I'm up for it." They rode out within the hour. The pace Cole set was punishing, fast enough to cover ground, but not so fast they'd kill the horses. They stopped only to rest the animals and switch to fresh mounts they'd brought as spares. Claire had never ridden this long or this hard. Every muscle screamed. Her back felt like it might snap. But she didn't complain, didn't ask to slow down. She just kept going, matching Cole stride for stride. They talked little. Conversation required energy neither of them could spare. But there was something in the shared silence, the rhythm of movement, that felt almost companionable. They were in this together, whatever this turned out to be. Night fell, and they stopped to make camp in a stand of trees that offered some shelter from the wind. Cole built a small fire while Clara tended the horses, rubbing them down and checking their hooves for ice. They ate cold rations, jerky and hard biscuits, washing it down with water from canteens they had to thaw near the fire. Clara sat close to the flames, trying to absorb every bit of warmth. "You think Garrett's pulling out?" she asked. "Don't know. Could be the buyers getting cold feet. Could be someone else made him a better offer." Cole poked at the fire. "Could be nothing, and he's just being cautious." "You don't believe that?" "No." Clara pulled her coat tighter. "If the deal falls through, what do we do?" "Find another buyer. Fast." He looked at her. "You handled Garrett once. You can do it again." "That was different. I had time to prepare." "You've got tonight. That'll have to be enough." She wanted to argue, to say it wasn't fair, that she was still too new at this. But fairness had nothing to do with it. The ranch needed this sale, and she was the only one who could make it happen. "Tell me everything you know about cattle buyers in Cheyenne," she said. "Names, reputations, who owes, who favors." Cole raised an eyebrow. "Planning to play them against each other?" "If I have to." Something like approval crossed his face. "All right, let's start with the big operations." They talked deep into the night, Cole feeding her information while Clara took mental notes, building a strategy. By the time they banked the fire and settled into sleep, she had the outline of a plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. She lay awake for a while, staring up at stars so bright they looked fake. Cole's breathing evened out nearby, steady and low. She wondered if he ever felt the kind of fear that was eating at her now, the fear of failing, of letting everyone down, of proving all the doubters right. Probably not, she decided. Men like Cole didn't seem to operate that way. But then his voice came out of the darkness, quiet. Clara? She hadn't realized he was still awake. Yeah? You're going to be fine tomorrow. You know that, right? I don't know anything. You know more than you think. A pause. And you don't give up. That counts for a lot. She wanted to believe him. Thanks. Get some sleep. This time she did, exhaustion finally pulling her under. They reached Cheyenne late the next afternoon, both of them filthy and sore from the ride. Clara barely had time to check into the hotel and wash her face before she had to meet Garrett. His office looked the same as before, but his expression was grimmer. He stood when she entered, which he hadn't done last time. Miss Whitmore, thank you for coming so quickly. Your message said it was urgent. It is. He gestured to a chair. Sit, please. Clara sat, her back straight despite the fatigue. What happened? Garrett pulled out a sheaf of papers. The buyer I had lined up, Morrison, he's backing out. Claims the market's shifted and he can't justify the price we agreed on. That's not our problem. We have a contract. We have a letter of intent. The full contract wasn't signed yet. He looked pained. Morrison knows that. He's using it as leverage to renegotiate at a lower price. Clara's hands clenched. How much lower? 15%. The number hit her like a fist. 15% would wipe out their profit margin, and then some. They'd lose money on the sale. That's unacceptable. I agree. Which is why I wanted you here. Garrett leaned forward. There's another buyer. Smaller operation, but solid. Name's Callahan. He's interested, but he wants to meet you first. See if you're someone he can do business with long term. When? Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Garrett's expression was serious. Miss Whitmore, I'll be honest, Callahan's particular. He doesn't work with just anyone, and he's got strong opinions about who he trusts. You'll need to convince him. What do I need to do? Be honest. Be competent. Don't oversell. He paused. And don't let him rattle you. He'll test you, see if you crack under pressure. Clara thought about the hands back at the ranch, counting on this sale. Thought about Dutch and Jesse and all the others who'd slowly started to believe she might actually pull this off. I won't crack, she said. Garrett studied her, then nodded. I believe you. Meeting's at the Cattlemen's Club. I'll introduce you, then step back. The rest is up to you. Clara left his office feeling the weight of it settle on her shoulders. Back at the hotel, she found Cole waiting in the lobby. Well? She told him everything. He listened without interrupting, his expression dark. Callahan, he said when she finished. I've heard of him. Tough, but fair. If he agrees to work with you, he'll stick to it. And if he doesn't? Then we're out of options. Clara nodded. She'd figured as much. Garrett said he'll test me. Any idea what that means? Could be anything. Questions about your operation, your experience, your plans. Cole looked at her. Or he might just want to see if you flinch when he pushes. I won't. Good. He stood. Get something to eat. Get some rest. I'll see you in the morning. You're not coming to the meeting? No, this is your deal. He put a hand on her shoulder briefly. You've got this. After he left, Clara went up to her room and tried to eat the dinner she'd ordered. Her stomach was too tight to handle much, but she forced down what she could. Then she reviewed her notes, went over the numbers one more time, and finally lay down. Sleep came in fragments, broken by anxiety and the unfamiliar sounds of the hotel. When morning came, she felt hollowed out and jittery. She dressed carefully, practical but presentable, and met Garrett outside the Cattlemen's Club at 8:45. The building was imposing, all dark wood and brass fixtures, the kind of place that made it clear women weren't the usual clientele. Inside, Garrett led her to a private room where a man sat alone at a long table. He was older than Garrett, maybe 60, with white hair and a face carved by weather and years. He stood when they entered. Callahan, this is Clara Whitmore, owner of the Double T. Callahan's handshake was firm, his eyes sharp. Miss Whitmore. Mr. Callahan. They sat. Garrett made brief introductions, outlined the situation, then excused himself. I'll let you two talk business. And then Clara was alone with a man who held the ranch's future in his hands. Callahan didn't waste time. Garrett tells me you've been running the Double T for a few months now. That's right. And before that? Before that, I'd never set foot on a ranch in my life. His eyebrows rose. You're honest. That's something. He leaned back. Why should I do business with someone so inexperienced? Clara met his gaze. Because inexperience isn't the same as incompetence. I don't know everything about ranching yet, but I know my numbers, I know my operation, and I know what I'm willing to accept. I won't pretend to be something I'm not, but I also won't let anyone take advantage because they think I'm easy to push around. Callahan's expression didn't change. Morrison tried to renegotiate your deal. Why didn't you take it? Because it was a bad deal. We'd lose money, and I don't work at a loss. Even if it means walking away with nothing? Especially then. A bad deal now means worse deals later. I'd rather take the hit and find someone who'll negotiate in good faith. He nodded slowly. Tell me about your herd. Quality, health, breeding. Clara walked him through it, citing specifics from the ledger she'd memorized. She didn't embellish or hedge. When he asked about losses from the recent storm, she told him the truth. 8 head. Which ones? Why? That's a significant loss, he said. It is, but it doesn't change the quality of what we're selling. What's your plan for spring? Expand the herd if we can afford the breeding stock. Improve the grazing rotation. Negotiate contracts early instead of waiting until we're desperate. Callahan asked more questions about water rights, about her foreman, about how she planned to handle the business long term. Clara answered each one as directly as she could, refusing to bullshit or oversell. Finally, he sat back. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone who'd try harder to impress me. He folded his hands. I'll make you an offer, Miss Whitmore. Same terms you had with Morrison, minus 2% to account for the risk of working with an unproven operator. Take it or leave it. Clara did the math in her head. 2% was significant but manageable. They'd still turn a profit. But something about the way he'd phrased it, take it or leave it, felt like another test. I'll take it, she said, with one condition. His eyes narrowed. What condition? You give me first option on your spring feed surplus at market rate. We're expanding, and I'd rather work with someone I trust than scramble for supply. Callahan stared at her. Then he laughed, a short, sharp bark. You've got nerve. Is that a yes? It's a maybe. Let me see how this first deal goes. He stood and extended his hand. We've got an agreement, Miss Whitmore. She shook it, relief flooding through her so fast she almost felt dizzy. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If your cattle aren't what you promised, this'll be the last deal we make. They will be. Then I'll see you at delivery. Clara left the club feeling like she'd just survived something she hadn't been sure she could. Outside, Garrett was waiting. Well? We have a deal. He grinned. I knew you could do it. You had more faith than I did. Sometimes that's all it takes. He clapped her on the shoulder. I'll draw up the paperwork and send it to you. Congratulations, Miss Whitmore. Clara walked back to the hotel in a daze. She'd done it. Again. Against odds she hadn't fully understood until they were already stacked against her. Cole was in the lobby. He took one look at her face and nodded. You got it. I got it. Good. He picked up his hat. Let's go home. They rode out that afternoon, the same punishing pace as before, but somehow easier now that the pressure was off. Clara felt lighter despite the exhaustion, the fear that had been gnawing at her finally loosening its grip. That night they made camp in the same spot as before. The fire crackled and Clara sat close, warming her hands. Thank you, she said, for believing I could do this. Cole looked at her across the flames. I didn't believe anything. I just knew you wouldn't quit. Is there a difference? Yeah, belief is hoping someone will succeed. Knowing they won't quit is understanding they'll figure it out even if they fail the first few times. He paused. You don't need belief, Clara. You need experience, and you're getting it. She wanted to say something, to tell him what it meant to have someone in her corner who didn't coddle or condescend, but the words felt too big, too raw. Instead, she said, I'm glad you're here. So am I. The fire burned low. The stars came out. And for the first time since she'd stepped off that train months ago, Clara felt like maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. They rode into the ranch the next evening, just as the sun was setting. The hands came out to meet them, Dutch in the lead. Well? He asked. We've got a buyer, Clara said. Better terms than before. A cheer went up. Jesse whooped and threw his hat in the air. Even Dutch smiled. That night, they gathered in the bunkhouse again, passing around whiskey and celebrating. Clara sat among them, listening to their stories, their laughter, and felt something shift inside her. These men weren't just workers anymore. They were hers, her crew, her responsibility. And she was theirs. Later, back in the main house, she sat at the table with the ledger open in front of her. The numbers looked better now. Not perfect, never perfect, but sustainable. She'd made it through the winter's worst, negotiated 2 major deals, and kept the ranch running. A knock at the door. Cole, of course. "Thought you'd be asleep," she said. "Could say the same." He came in, closed the door. "Wanted to talk to you about something." Clara set down her pen. "What is it?" He hesitated, which was unusual for him. "When spring comes, we're going to need to expand. Hire more hands, maybe buy adjoining land if it becomes available. That means more risk, more capital." "I know. It also means you're going to be making decisions I can't make for you. Big ones." He looked at her directly. "You ready for that?" Clara thought about everything she'd learned, everything she'd survived. The storm, the negotiations, the endless grinding work. "No," she said honestly, "but I'll do it anyway." Cole's expression softened, just slightly, just enough. "That's the right answer." He started to leave, then turned back. "For what it's worth, Thomas would have been proud of what you've done here." The words hit harder than she expected. "You think so?" "I know so." He tipped his hat. "Good night, Clara." "Good night." After he left, Clara sat alone in the quiet house, the fire burning low, and let herself feel the full weight of what she'd accomplished. It wasn't victory, not yet. There would be more challenges, more tests, more moments where she'd doubt herself, but she'd proven something important to the hands, to Garrett and Callahan, to Cole, and most of all, to herself. She could do this. She was doing this, and she wasn't going to stop. Spring came late that year, the thaw slow and grudging. Clara stood on the porch watching ice break apart in the creek, listening to water rush over stones for the first time in months. The sound felt like a promise that the worst was behind them, that they'd survived. Dutch came around the side of the barn leading a roan mare, heavily pregnant and moving slow. "This one's close. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow." Clara nodded. "I'll check on her after I finish the books." "You know what you're doing with that?" "Enough not to kill her." She'd been studying foaling for weeks, reading everything Thomas had left behind, asking questions until Dutch probably wanted to throttle her. "If something goes wrong, I'll get you." "Fair enough." He patted the mare's neck. "She's a good one. Strong bloodline. Foal should fetch a decent price come fall. Money." Everything came back to money. The Callahan deal had kept them afloat through winter, but barely. They'd paid wages, bought feed, made essential repairs. Now spring meant new expenses, breeding fees, equipment, hiring on extra hands for the busy season. The ledger balanced, but just barely, with no room for mistakes. Cole appeared in the barn doorway, wiping grease off his hands. "Water pump's fixed. Should hold until we can afford to replace it proper." "How long is that?" "Hard to say. Depends on the spring calves." He squinted at the sky. "Weather holds, we should have a good season. Weather doesn't. We're back where we started." Clara hated how much depended on things she couldn't control. She could make good deals, manage the ranch efficiently, work herself half to death, and still lose everything if the weather turned bad or disease swept through the herd. "You look worried," Cole said. "I'm always worried." "That's different from looking it." He came closer, studying her face. "What's on your mind?" Clara hesitated. She'd been thinking about the letter from her mother that had arrived last week, full of careful optimism about her brother finding work, about the debts getting smaller. But underneath the optimism, Clara could read the strain. They needed help. More than the small amounts she'd been able to send. "My family's struggling," she said finally. "I want to send them more money, but I don't know if we can spare it." Cole was quiet for a moment. "How much more?" "Enough to clear the remaining debts. Maybe $300. He let out a low whistle. "That's a big chunk." "I know. You could do it, if we're careful, but it would mean no cushion for emergencies." He looked at her. "That a risk you want to take?" Clara thought about her brother's face the day she'd left, trying so hard to look brave. Thought about her mother's hands, worn from taking in laundry to make ends meet. They're my family. I'm not saying don't help them. Just make sure you understand what you're choosing. Cole's voice was careful, not judging. You send that money and something goes wrong here. We might not recover. And if I don't send it and something happens to them, then that's on circumstances, not you. But it would feel like it was on her. Clara turned away, frustration rising. I came here to fix their situation. That was the whole point. Marry Thomas, send money home, solve the problem. Thomas is dead. The situation changed. I know that. Her voice came out sharper than she intended. I know everything changed, but they're still depending on me, and I can't just... She stopped, swallowing hard. Cole didn't fill the silence. He just waited, patient as always. I'll think about it, Clara said finally. That's all I'm asking. He went back to work, leaving her alone with the decision. She knew what the smart choice was. Keep the money, maintain the cushion, protect the ranch. But smart didn't always feel right, and right didn't always feel possible. That night, the mare went into labor. Clara was in the barn when it started, checking on her before bed. The mare's breathing changed, became labored, and Clara's heart kicked into a faster rhythm. She ran for Dutch. He came quickly, took one look and rolled up his sleeves. Get towels, hot water, and find Cole. Clara did all three, moving on instinct. By the time she got back, the mare was down, sides heaving. Dutch knelt beside her, hands steady and sure. First foal? Clara asked. Yeah, she's doing all right, just taking her time. He glanced up. You want to learn? Now's your chance. Get down here. Clara knelt in the straw. Dutch talked her through what he was seeing, what to watch for, when to intervene, and when to let nature take its course. The mare pushed, strained, and Clara felt helpless, wanting to do something but knowing there was nothing to do except wait. Cole arrived, took in the scene, and settled against the stall wall. How long? Could be hours, Dutch said. Could be minutes. She'll tell us when she's ready. It was hours. Long, tense hours where Clara's back ached from kneeling and her nerves stretched thin. But finally, the foal came, slick and gangly, all legs in confusion. The mare turned immediately, nuzzling it, making low sounds Clara had never heard before. There we go, Dutch said, satisfaction in his voice. Colt, good size. Clara watched the foal struggle to stand, falling twice before getting its legs under it. Something about the determination in those attempts made her throat tight. You did good, Cole said quietly. It took her a moment to realize he was talking to her, not the mare. I didn't do anything. You stayed. You learned. That counts. After Dutch declared both mare and foal healthy and left to get some sleep, Clara remained in the barn. She sat in the straw, watching the colt nurse, something settling in her chest that she couldn't name. Cole sat down beside her. Neither of them spoke for a while. I'm going to send the money, Clara said finally. He didn't argue. All right. You think I'm making a mistake. I think you're making a choice. There's a difference. He paused. For what it's worth, I understand why. Clara looked at him. His profile was shadowed in the dim lamplight, expression unreadable. Do you have family somewhere? Had. Don't anymore. The finality in his tone told her not to push, but she did anyway. What happened? Father drank himself to death. Mother followed a year later, different reasons. His voice was flat, factual. I left before that, though. Wasn't much keeping me there. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a long time ago. He shifted, stretching his legs out. Point is, I get it. Family's complicated. Sometimes you've got to help even when it's not the smart play. Even if it costs you? Especially then. Otherwise, what are you working for? Clara turned that over in her mind. She'd been so focused on keeping the ranch running, on proving she could do this, that she'd almost forgotten why she'd come here in the first place. The ranch was supposed to be a means to an end, a way to save her family. Somewhere along the way, it had become the end itself. I'll write to my mother tomorrow, she said. Let her know the money's coming. Cole nodded. We'll make it work. How can you be sure? Because we don't have another option. He stood, offered her a hand up. Come on, you need sleep. She took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. His grip was warm, calloused, steady. For a moment they stood there, close enough that she could see the tiredness in his eyes, the lines that had deepened over the winter. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." "You don't need to thank me for doing my job." "It's more than that. You know it is." Something shifted in his expression. Uncertainty, maybe, or recognition of something neither of them had wanted to acknowledge. Then he stepped back, breaking the moment. "Get some rest, Clara." She did, but sleep was fitful, full of half-formed dreams about horses and money and hands reaching for things they couldn't quite grasp. The next week brought the first real warmth, and with it, a flurry of activity. Fences needed mending after winter damage. The garden plot had to be turned and planted. New calves appeared almost daily, keeping everyone busy with checks and interventions. Clara sent the money to her mother with a letter explaining that it might be the last large sum for a while. Her mother's response came faster than expected, gratitude and relief pouring off the page, along with news that her brother had found steady work and the debts were finally cleared. Reading it, Clara felt the weight she'd been carrying since her father's death finally lift. They were safe. She'd done what she'd set out to do. But that relief was complicated by the knowledge that she'd gambled the ranch's safety to achieve it. Now she had to make sure that gamble paid off. "We need to talk about expansion," Cole said one morning over coffee. Clara set down her cup. "I'm listening." "Henderson's place, 2 miles west. He's selling 2,200 acres, decent grazing land, access to the river." Cole pulled out a crude map and spread it on the table. "If we bought it, we could nearly double our operation." "How much?" $1,200. Clara's stomach dropped. "We don't have $1,200. "No, but we could get a loan." She stared at him. "A loan? It's how most ranchers expand. You borrow against your assets, buy the land, use the increased productivity to pay back the loan." He tapped the map. "This land is good, Clara. It won't stay available long. And if something goes wrong, if we can't pay back the loan, then we lose everything." He said it calmly, like he was discussing the weather. "But if we don't expand, we stay small, and small operations don't survive long out here." Clara stood, pacing to the window. Outside, Jesse and another hand were working on a corral gate. The scene looked peaceful, manageable. The idea of doubling everything, the land, the cattle, the risk, made her chest tight. "How soon do we need to decide?" "Henderson wants an answer by end of month. That gives us 2 weeks. I need time to think." "Take it, but don't take too long." Cole folded the map. "This is the kind of opportunity Thomas would have jumped on." "Thomas is dead." The words came out harsher than she meant. Cole didn't flinch. "Yeah, he is, but the ranch isn't. And if you want it to grow, you're going to have to take some risks." He left, and Clara stood alone, staring at the map. Everything in her screamed caution. Don't borrow money you can't guarantee you'll repay. Don't bet everything on expansion. Don't risk what you've built. But another part, quieter but insistent, whispered that Cole was right. Standing still wasn't safety. It was just a slower way to fail. She spent the next week riding out to Henderson's property, walking the land, checking water sources, and grazing quality. It was good land, better than good. With it, they could run twice the cattle, maybe more. The river access alone was worth the price. But the debt, the risk, the possibility of losing everything. Dutch found her standing on a rise overlooking Henderson's best pasture, the grass already greening up. "Thinking about buying?" "Thinking about whether I'm brave enough to try." "Brave's got nothing to do with it. This is business." He spat into the grass. "Questions whether you trust your own judgment." "What if my judgment's wrong?" "Then you'll learn and do better next time. Same as everything else." He looked at her. "You've made good calls so far. Trust that." Clara wanted to. She really did. That night, she sat with the ledger, running numbers until her eyes blurred. If they bought the land, took the loan, and everything went according to plan, they'd be in excellent shape within 2 years. If it didn't, if they had a bad season, if prices dropped, if anything went wrong, they'd be ruined. A knock at the door. Cole, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one and sat down. "You're going to wear a hole in that ledger. I'm trying to find a scenario where this doesn't terrify me." "You won't. Big decisions are always terrifying." He sipped his coffee. But you can't let fear make your choices for you. What would you do if it was your decision? Cole was quiet for a long moment. I'd buy it, but that's easy for me to say. It's not my name on the loan. He met her eyes. What does your gut tell you? Clara thought about the land, the river, the potential. Thought about Thomas building this ranch from nothing, taking risks that must have seemed insane at the time. Thought about what she wanted, not just survival, but something lasting. My gut says do it. Then do it. Just like that? Just like that. He stood. You've earned the right to trust yourself, Clara. Stop waiting for permission. After he left, she sat with those words for a long time. Then she pulled out a clean sheet of paper and began drafting a letter to Henderson. By morning, it was sealed and ready to send. The loan came through faster than expected. Clara signed papers that made her hands shake, committing to debt that would take years to repay. But when Henderson handed her the deed to his property, something inside her settled. She'd made the choice. Now she'd live with it. Expanding meant hiring more hands. 3 new men arrived over the following weeks, experienced cowboys looking for steady work. Clara interviewed each one herself, learning to read body language and ask the right questions. By the end, she'd hired 2 and sent one on his way with a firm handshake and no hard feelings. The work intensified. More land meant more fence to maintain, more water sources to check, more cattle to manage. Clara fell into bed exhausted every night and woke to do it again. But the ranch was growing, becoming something bigger than survival. One afternoon in late spring, she was working on account books when Jessie burst into the house, face flushed. Miss Whitmore, you need to come quick. Clara was on her feet immediately. What happened? Cattle in the river, downstream section. They're stuck. She grabbed her coat and followed him out. They rode hard to the river where Cole and Dutch were already working. Clara could see the problem immediately. 5 head of cattle had gotten into a section where the bank was too steep to climb out, the current too strong to fight against. They were trapped, panicking. We need ropes, Cole shouted over the rushing water. And someone light enough to get down there without the bank giving way. Everyone looked at Clara. She was the smallest, the lightest. Tell me what to do, she said. Cole threw her a rope. Tie this around your waist. We'll anchor you. You get down there, loop the other end around each cow, and we'll pull them out. It sounded simple. It wasn't. Clara climbed down the muddy bank, rope tight around her middle, and immediately sank to her knees in muck. The water was freezing, moving fast enough to throw her off balance. The cattle were wild-eyed, thrashing. She approached the first one slowly, talking in a low voice like she'd seen Dutch do. The cow didn't want the rope. It kicked, spraying mud and water. Clara ducked, slipped, nearly went under. Her heart hammered, but she got the rope around its middle and shouted for them to pull. The cow came out fighting, but it came out. Clara worked through all 5, getting kicked twice and dunked once until all the cattle were safe on solid ground, and she was shaking from cold and adrenaline. Cole hauled her up the bank, hands iron strong on her arms. You all right? I'm fine, her teeth chattered. Cattle? Safe, thanks to you. That night, sitting by the fire wrapped in blankets, Clara realized she'd stopped thinking about the ranch as Thomas's legacy or an obligation to her family. It was hers now, completely. And she'd do whatever it took to protect it. The summer brought long days and brutal heat. Clara learned to work through it, learned which tasks could wait for cooler evening hours and which had to be done regardless of temperature. She learned to read the sky for storms, to spot illness in cattle before it spread, to negotiate with feed suppliers who thought they could overcharge a woman. Cole was there through all of it, teaching when she needed it, stepping back when she didn't, pushing her to trust her own judgment. They worked in an easy rhythm, built over months of shared labor and mutual respect. But something was changing between them. Clara felt it in the way he looked at her sometimes, the way conversations lingered after the practical matters were settled. In the careful distance he maintained, like he was fighting against something pulling him closer. She felt it too, the awareness of his presence, the way her pulse jumped when he came into a room, the disappointment when he left earlier than she'd hoped. It complicated everything. She was his boss. He worked for her. Crossing that line seemed impossibly fraught. But the line was already blurring, had been for months, and they both knew it. One evening in late summer, after a particularly long day, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The air had finally cooled, blessed relief after the heat. I've been thinking about winter, Clara said. About what we'll need. Already? Cole smiled slightly. Summer's barely over. I know, but last winter nearly broke us. I don't want to be caught unprepared again. Smart. He stretched, joints cracking. We'll need more feed stored, maybe hire one more hand to help with the workload. They talked logistics for a while, practical and efficient. But when the conversation ran out, neither of them moved to go inside. The silence between them felt different tonight, heavier, charged with things neither of them was saying. Clara, Cole said finally, his voice rougher than usual. She turned to look at him. He was staring out at the darkening land, jaw tight. I need to tell you something. Her heart started to pound. All right. I signed on with Thomas for 1 year. That year's almost up. Clara felt the ground shift under her. You're leaving. I'm saying the contract's done. If I stay, it's because we both choose it, not because I'm obligated. He finally looked at her. And before I make that choice, I need to know something. What? If I stay, it can't be just as your foreman. The words hung between them, stark and undeniable. Clara's breath caught. Cole? I know it's complicated. I know all the reasons it's a bad idea, but I can't keep pretending there's nothing here. His eyes were dark, intense. If that's not something you want, tell me now. I'll finish out the season and move on. No hard feelings. Clara's mind raced. Everything he'd said was true. It was complicated, potentially disastrous for the working relationship they'd built. But the thought of him leaving made something in her chest crack open. I don't want you to go, she said quietly. That's not an answer to what I'm asking. I know. She stood, moved to the porch rail, needing space to think. This ranch, everything we've built, I can't risk it on something that might not work. I'm not asking you to risk the ranch. I'm asking if what's between us is real. She turned to face him. Of course it's real, but that doesn't mean it's smart. Since when have you only done smart things? He stood too, moving closer. You bought land you could barely afford. You negotiated deals with men who wanted to dismiss you. You stayed when everyone thought you'd leave. None of that was safe, Clara, but you did it anyway. That was different. How? Because those risks had endpoints, measurable outcomes. This, whatever this was, didn't come with guarantees, but he was right. Nothing in her life since arriving here had been safe or guaranteed. She'd survived by taking chances and learning from failure. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I. He reached out, fingertips brushing her arm. But I'm tired of pretending I'm not. Clara looked at him, really looked. At the man who'd taught her everything, challenged her, believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. Who'd become something far more than just a foreman. If we do this and it doesn't work, then we'll figure it out, same as everything else. His hand closed around hers, warm and solid. I'm not asking for promises, Clara. Just honesty. She thought about all the honest things she'd been holding back. How she looked forward to seeing him every morning, how his praise meant more than anyone else's, how the idea of him leaving felt like losing something essential. I don't know how to do this, she said. Neither do I. He stepped closer. But we're both good at figuring things out. Clara laughed, surprising herself. The tension broke just enough that she could breathe again. This is insane. Probably. He was close enough now that she could feel the heat of him, see the pulse beating in his throat. But staying away from you has been driving me insane for months, so I'm not sure there's a sane option here. She should step back, should maintain the distance, should protect everything they'd built. Instead, she closed the gap between them and kissed him. For a moment, Cole went perfectly still. Then his arms came around her, pulling her close, and he kissed her back with an intensity that made her knees weak. It wasn't careful or uncertain. It was honest, raw, real. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara pressed her forehead to his chest. This changes everything, she whispered. Yeah. His hand moved through her hair, gentle. Is that all right? Clara thought about it, really thought, about the risk, the complications, the uncertainty, and about how right this felt, how inevitable, like something that had been building since the first day they met. Yes, she said. It's all right. They stood there on the porch as night fell completely, holding each other, neither one ready to let go or figure out what came next. For now, this was enough. The honest truth between them, finally spoken, and the willingness to face whatever came after, together. The morning after felt strange in ways Clara hadn't anticipated. She woke early, as always, but lay in bed longer than usual, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out what happened next. The kiss had been real. The feelings were real. But the practical implications of crossing that line with Cole felt overwhelming in the clear light of day. She dressed and went downstairs to find him already there, building up the fire. He looked up when she entered, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "Morning," he said finally. "Morning." The awkwardness stretched between them until Clara couldn't stand it. "Cole, about last night, we don't have to figure everything out right now," he interrupted gently. "Let's just take it one day at a time, see how it goes." Relief flooded through her. "That sounds reasonable. Good." He handed her a cup of coffee. "Because we've got work to do, and I'd rather not spend the day walking on eggshells." She smiled despite her nerves. "Agreed." They fell into their usual rhythm, discussing the day's tasks, checking on the cattle, coordinating with the hands. To anyone watching, nothing had changed. But Clara felt the difference in small ways. The way Cole's hand lingered on her shoulder when he passed. The way their eyes met and held for just a beat longer than necessary. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind her that something fundamental had shifted. Dutch noticed, of course. He had eyes like a hawk and too many years of experience reading people. But he didn't say anything, just watched them with an expression that might have been approval or might have been concern. Clara couldn't tell which. The summer work continued relentlessly. With the expanded land came expanded responsibilities, and there were days when Clara wondered if she'd bitten off more than she could handle. But slowly, steadily, the operation grew into itself. The new hands proved capable. The cattle thrived on the additional grazing land. The gamble was paying off. One afternoon in early fall, a letter arrived from Callahan. Clara opened it expecting business correspondence and found something else entirely. "He wants to meet," she told Cole. "Says he's got a proposition." "What kind of proposition?" "Doesn't say. Just asks if I can come to Cheyenne next week." Cole frowned. "Could be good. Could be trouble." Only one way to find out. They made the trip together this time, both of them riding in companionable silence. Things between them had settled into something Clara didn't have a name for yet. Not quite a courtship, not quite a partnership, but something that felt solid despite its undefined edges. Callahan's office was in the same building as Garrett's. He stood when Clara entered, shook her hand firmly, then gestured to a chair. "Miss Whitmore, thank you for coming." "Mr. Callahan, your letter said you had a proposition?" "I do." He pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. "I'm expanding my operation into Montana. Need reliable suppliers I can trust. I want to offer you an exclusive contract, all your cattle, guaranteed purchase, 3-year term." Clara opened the folder and scanned the numbers. They were good. Better than good. The kind of security that would eliminate almost all her financial worries. But something made her pause. "Why me? You barely know my operation." Callahan leaned back in his chair. "I know enough. You deliver quality, you keep your word, and you don't try to play games. That's worth more than most people realize." He paused. "I'm getting older, Miss Whitmore. I'm building something to last, and I need people I can count on. I think you're one of them." Clara read through the contract carefully, looking for catches. The terms were fair, almost generous. Cole, reading over her shoulder, stayed silent, but she could feel his tension. "Can I have a few days to think about it?" she asked. "Of course, take a week, but I'll need an answer by then. I've got other ranchers interested, if you're not." Outside, Clara and Cole walked to a nearby restaurant in silence. They ordered food neither of them had much appetite for. "What are you thinking?" Cole asked. "I'm thinking it's everything I should want. Security, guaranteed income, no more scrambling for buyers." She pushed food around her plate. "But something about it bothers me. Exclusive means you can't sell to anyone else. You're locked in. For 3 years. If Callahan's prices drop or his needs change, I'm stuck." Cole nodded slowly. "It's the safe choice, but it's also giving up control." Clara thought about that. About how much control had meant to her since arriving here. The ability to make her own decisions, negotiate her own deals, build something that was truly hers. Thomas built this ranch on independence, she said. I don't know if selling that away is the right move. Then don't. But the security isn't worth it if it costs you the thing that matters most. Cole met her eyes. You've worked too hard to build this place to hand over the reins now. Clara sat with that through the meal and the ride back to the hotel. That night, lying awake, she thought about what kind of rancher she wanted to be. Safe and secure but constrained, or independent and exposed but free to choose her own path. By morning, she knew her answer. She met with Callahan the next day. I appreciate the offer, and I'm honored you thought of me, but I can't accept an exclusive contract. His eyebrows rose. Can I ask why? Because I'm not ready to give up control of my own business. I'm happy to continue selling to you to build that relationship. But I need to maintain the freedom to make my own decisions. Callahan studied her for a long moment, then smiled. You know, I thought you might say that. He pulled out a different folder. How about this instead? Preferred supplier status. I give you first option on my purchases. You give me competitive pricing, but no exclusivity on either side. Clara read through this new proposal. It gave her most of the benefits without the constraints. This could work. I thought it might. Callahan extended his hand. You remind me of myself 30 years ago, Miss Whitmore. Too stubborn to take the easy path. It'll cost you sometimes, but you'll sleep better at night. She shook his hand, feeling like she'd passed some kind of test she hadn't known she was taking. On the ride home, Cole was quieter than usual. Clara finally asked what was on his mind. I've been thinking about my contract, he said. About whether I stay. Clara's heart lurched. She'd almost forgotten that conversation, pushed it aside in the rush of everything else. And? I want to stay, but not as your foreman. The words hit her like cold water. Cole, hear me out. He pulled his horse to a stop, turned to face her. I want to be your partner. Equal stake in the ranch, equal say in decisions. I've got some money saved, enough to buy in properly. Clara stared at him. You want to buy into the ranch? I want to build it with you. Not for you, with you. His expression was serious, vulnerable in a way she'd rarely seen. I know it's complicated, especially given everything else between us, but I can't keep working for you, Clara. It doesn't feel right anymore. She understood what he wasn't saying, that the power dynamic between employer and employee was making everything harder, that he needed to stand beside her as an equal, not beneath her as a subordinate. How much are we talking about? She asked carefully. Cole named a figure. It was substantial but fair, given the ranch's current value. With that investment, they could expand even further, hire more hands, maybe even buy additional land if opportunities arose. But it would mean sharing control, sharing decisions, sharing everything. I need time to think about this, Clara said. I know. Take whatever time you need. He started writing again. Just know that I'm serious about all of it. Clara spent the next week wrestling with the decision. She talked to Dutch, who listened carefully and then said, Cole's a good man, smart, hardworking, honest. You could do worse for a partner. She reviewed the finances until her head ached. She lay awake at night imagining different futures, different choices. Finally, she called a meeting. Cole, Dutch, and Jesse gathered in the main house, all of them looking curious and slightly worried. I've made some decisions, Clara said, standing at the head of the table because it felt right to claim that space. First, I'm accepting Cole's offer to buy into the ranch as an equal partner. Jesse let out a whoop. Dutch nodded approvingly. Cole's expression remained carefully neutral, but she saw relief in his eyes. Second, I'm promoting Dutch to head foreman. Jesse, you'll be assistant foreman. She looked at both of them. We're expanding, and I need people I trust in leadership positions. Dutch blinked, clearly surprised. You sure about that? I'm not getting any younger. I'm sure. You've earned it 10 times over. After Jesse and Dutch left, congratulating each other and already discussing plans, Clara and Cole sat alone in the quiet house. Equal partners, Cole said slowly, testing the words. Equal partners. We'll need to draw up proper papers, make it legal. Clara poured them each a drink. This means you get a say in everything, even when we disagree. Especially when we disagree. He took the glass she offered. And the other thing? Between us? Clara had thought about that too. We figure it out as we go, same as everything else. But Cole, If this doesn't work, if we try and it falls apart, then we deal with it like adults and keep running the ranch. He moved closer. I'm not going to let personal feelings destroy what we've built. Neither are you. We're both too stubborn for that. She had to laugh because he was right. When did this get so complicated? Probably around the time you stepped off that train and refused to leave when any sane person would have run. He set down his glass and took her hands. Clara, I don't have all the answers. I don't know if we're making the right choice, but I know I want to try. And I know I trust you, trust us, enough to take the risk. Clara looked at their joined hands, calloused and scarred from months of hard work. Hands that had built something real together. I trust us too. He kissed her then, slow and deliberate, and Clara let herself feel it without overthinking. The wanting, the fear, the hope. All of it tangled together in something that felt like the beginning of something rather than the end. They drew up the partnership papers over the following weeks, working with a lawyer in Cheyenne to make everything official. Cole's investment went toward hiring 3 more permanent hands and purchasing a small herd of breeding stock that would expand their operation further. By the time the paperwork was finalized and signed, autumn had painted the mountains in shades of gold and rust. The day they signed, they celebrated quietly. Just the two of them, sitting on the porch as the sun set. No grand gestures, no ceremony, just the satisfaction of knowing they'd built something that would last. What now? Clara asked. Now we keep working. Cole stretched, looking out over land that belonged to both of them now. And we see what comes next. What came next was winter, their second together, but the first as partners. It was hard, as winter always was, but easier than the year before. They'd learned from their mistakes, prepared better, worked smarter. The hands respected both of them, took orders from either without question. And Clara and Cole learned to navigate their complicated relationship with surprising grace. They argued sometimes, over breeding decisions, over whether to repair or replace equipment, over 1,000 small things that added up. But they'd learned to argue without destroying, to disagree and still respect each other's perspective. The physical side of their relationship developed slowly, constrained by the fact that they both still lived in separate quarters and the ranch operated under a dozen watchful eyes. But there were stolen moments, kisses in the barn when no one was looking, hands clasped under the table during meals, the quiet intimacy of working side by side through long days. Dutch caught them kissing in the barn one afternoon and just shook his head, smiling. About time you two figured that out. We've been taking bets for months. Clara felt her face heat. You've been betting on us? Not much else to do during winter nights. He tipped his hat. For what it's worth, I had my money on you sorting it out by spring. Jesse said it'd take till summer. I won. After he left, Clara turned to Cole. They've been betting on us. I know. I've got money on it too. What did you bet? That we'd still be figuring it out a year from now. He grinned. I like my odds. Spring came again, the second spring since Clara's arrival. The ranch had transformed. More land, more cattle, more hands, better equipment. The ledger showed profits, real profits, enough to pay down the loan ahead of schedule and still have cushion for emergencies. Clara sent money to her mother. Not out of desperation this time, but because she could. Her mother's letters painted a picture of a family that had stabilized, found its footing. Her brother had steady work, was even courting a girl. They were going to be all right. One evening in late spring, Clara stood on the porch watching the sunset and felt something settle in her chest that she hadn't felt since before her father died. Peace. Not perfect, not without worry or challenge, but peace nonetheless. Cole came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. What are you thinking about? How different everything is from when I arrived. She leaned back against him. I came here expecting to marry a stranger and live a life someone else chose for me. Instead, I got this. Disappointed? She turned in his arms to face him. Not even a little bit. They stood there as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The ranch spread out before them, their ranch, built through work and sacrifice and stubbornness. I want to ask you something, Cole said, his voice lower, more serious. Clara's heart kicked up. All right. We're partners in the ranch. We've been, whatever we've been, for months now. He took a breath. I want to make it official. All of it. Clara went very still. Cole, I'm not good with words. Never have been. But I know what I want, and it's you. This life, this ranch, everything we've built, I want to keep building it with you as your husband, not just your business partner. She'd known this was coming, had felt it approaching like a storm on the horizon, but hearing it spoken aloud still knocked the breath from her lungs. I came here to marry a man I didn't know, she said carefully, for all the wrong reasons. Desperation, duty, obligation. I swore I'd never do that again, never marry for anything less than something real. Cole's expression closed slightly. I understand. I'm not finished. She took his hands. What I feel for you is real, Cole. More real than anything I've felt in my life. You've seen me at my worst, stubborn, scared, making mistakes left and right, and you stayed anyway. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You pushed me to be better, stronger. She paused, gathering courage. You're asking if I'll marry you. I'm saying yes, but only if you understand what you're getting. His eyes widened. Clara, I'm not going to be an easy wife. I'll argue when I think you're wrong. I'll push back when I disagree. I won't defer to you just because you're my husband, and I won't pretend to be softer or more agreeable than I am. A slow smile spread across Cole's face. I'm counting on it. And I want a partnership in everything. Equal say, equal work, equal respect. That's all I've ever wanted. Clara felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back. Then yes, I'll marry you. Cole kissed her, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them. Then he pulled back, laughing softly. What? Clara asked. I don't have a ring. Didn't plan this far ahead. I don't need a ring. She looked down at her work-roughened hands. My hands wouldn't know what to do with jewelry anyway. Still, he thought for a moment. There was something of Thomas's. A ring that belonged to his mother. He showed it to me once, said if he ever found the right woman, he'd offer it. I think he'd want you to have it. Clara's throat tightened. You think so? I know so. Cole brushed a thumb across her cheek. You're exactly what he hoped for. What this place needed. They told the hands the next morning. The reaction was mixed, mostly positive, some surprise, a few raised eyebrows. But Dutch clapped Cole on the shoulder and told Clara she was getting a decent man, which felt like the highest praise he knew how to give. They decided on a simple ceremony, no fuss or fanfare. Just a justice of the peace in town, with Dutch and Jessie as witnesses. Clara wore a simple dress, nothing fancy, nothing impractical, and Cole wore his best shirt, cleaned up better than she'd ever seen him. The ceremony itself was brief, almost perfunctory. Clara repeated words that felt both strange and right, making promises she intended to keep. When the justice pronounced them married, Cole kissed her with a tenderness that made her chest ache. Walking out of the courthouse as Clara Rourke felt surreal. She'd come to Wyoming as Clara Whitmore, expecting to become Clara Whitmore II. Instead, she was someone entirely new, someone she'd built from scratch through hard work and harder choices. They spent their wedding night in the ranch house, in the bedroom that had been Clara's alone for so long and was now theirs. It wasn't perfect or particularly romantic. They were both too tired and too aware of the work waiting in the morning for grand gestures. But it was real and honest, and theirs. Lying in the darkness afterward, Clara's head on Cole's chest, she felt the kind of contentment she'd only dreamed about. I never thought I'd end up here, she said quietly. Where? Wyoming? Happy? She paused. Actually happy, not just surviving. Cole's arm tightened around her. You earned it, every bit of it. We earned it. Yeah. His voice was soft. We did. The months that followed settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable. Clara and Cole ran the ranch together, making decisions jointly, occasionally arguing but always finding their way to compromise. The operation continued to grow, slowly but steadily. Letters from Clara's family became more frequent, filled with news of her brother's engagement and her mother's gradual return to health. They wanted her to visit, to bring her new husband and show them this life she'd built. Clara promised she would, when work allowed. But the truth was, she was in no hurry to leave. Everything she needed was here. The land, the work, the man sleeping beside her each night. The ranch had become more than just a means of survival or a way to help her family. It had become home. One afternoon in high summer, Clara was working on the books when she came across Thomas's original ledger, the one he'd kept before he died. She flipped through it, seeing his careful handwriting, his meticulous records. Near the back, she found something she'd never noticed before, a letter, folded and tucked between pages. It was addressed to her. Her hands shook as she opened it. Clara, if you're reading this, I'm likely dead and you've inherited something you never asked for. I'm sorry for that. Sorry for the burden. Sorry for the complication. But I want you to know why I chose you. We're family, however distant. But more than that, your mother's letters over the years painted a picture of a young woman with intelligence and determination. Someone who wouldn't break easy. Someone who could build something if given the chance. This ranch was my life's work. I built it from nothing, and I wanted it to go to someone who would value it. Not for what it's worth in dollars, but for what it represents: freedom, independence, the ability to make your own way. I don't know if you'll stay or sell. Either choice is valid. But if you stay, know that I believed you could do this. And I hope, wherever I am, that I was right. Build something lasting, Clara. Not just a ranch, but a life. That's all any of us can hope for. Thomas. Clara read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Cole found her like that, still sitting at the table, the letter clutched in her hands. What is it? He crouched beside her chair. She handed him the letter, watched his expression soften as he read. He knew, she said when Cole looked up. He knew I could do this before I did. He was a smart man. Clara stood, walked to the window. Outside, hands were working the corral. Cattle grazed in the distance. The land stretched toward mountains that no longer looked threatening, just beautiful. I want to do something, she said. Something to honor what he built. What did you have in mind? She turned to face Cole. I want to rename the ranch. Not the double T. We keep that. But I want a proper name. Something that means something. Cole considered. What would you call it? Clara thought about her journey, about arriving lost and scared and desperate, about learning to be strong, to trust herself, to build something real, about the people who'd helped her along the way. Perseverance Ranch, she said finally, because that's what this place has taught me, that you don't have to be perfect or fearless or even know what you're doing. You just have to keep going. Cole smiled. I like it. They had a sign made, hung it over the entrance to the property. Dutch complained it was sentimental nonsense, but Clara caught him standing beneath it one morning, nodding with what looked like approval. As summer turned to fall and fall to winter again, Clara kept finding herself pausing in moments that would have been ordinary before. Watching Cole work with the horses, listening to the hands joke over dinner, checking the ledger and seeing numbers that represented not just survival but growth. She'd come to Wyoming expecting to sacrifice herself for her family's sake. Instead, she'd found herself. Found strength she didn't know she had. Found a partner who saw her clearly and loved her anyway. Found a home in the last place she'd ever expected. One evening, as the first snow of winter began to fall, Clara stood on the porch watching it settle on the land. Cole came out and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Cold? He asked. A little, but I don't mind. They stood together, watching the world turn white and quiet. Somewhere in the barn, a horse whinnied. In the bunkhouse, someone was playing a harmonica badly, but enthusiastically. You ever regret it? Cole asked. Coming here, staying, all of it? Clara thought about the girl who'd stepped off that train over 2 years ago. So young, so scared, so certain she was making a terrible mistake. She thought about everything that had happened since. The failures and victories, the fear and determination, the slow, painful growth into someone she was proud to be. Not for a second, she said. You? Asking you to marry me? Best decision I ever made. He pulled her closer. Even when you're being stubborn. Especially when I'm being stubborn. He laughed, and the sound was warm in the cold air. Clara leaned into him, feeling the solid weight of his presence, the certainty of this life they'd built together. The ranch would face more challenges. Weather, markets, the endless work of keeping everything running. But they'd face it together, as partners, as equals. The snow fell harder, covering the land in clean white. In the spring it would melt and feed the grass, and the cycle would continue. That was the way of this place. Hard winters followed by renewal, struggle followed by growth. Clara had learned to live with that rhythm, to trust it even when it was difficult. She'd learned that survival wasn't about avoiding hardship, but about enduring it, learning from it, becoming stronger because of it. She'd learned that home wasn't a place you were born or a person you married out of duty. It was something you built, piece by piece, choice by choice, day by day. And she'd learned that the most important thing wasn't being perfect or fearless or always knowing the right answer. It was showing up, doing the work, and refusing to quit even when quitting seemed like the easier path. That's what this land had taught her. What Cole had taught her. What she'd taught herself through 2 years of mistakes and victories and everything in between. The life she'd built here wasn't the one she'd imagined when she left the East Coast. It was harder, rougher, more uncertain, but it was hers. Wholly, completely, undeniably hers, in a way nothing else had ever been. And that made all the difference. As the snow continued to fall and the night deepened around them, Clara felt the last piece of uncertainty finally settle. She wasn't the desperate girl who'd answered a stranger's letter anymore. She was a rancher, a business owner, a partner, a wife. She was someone who'd faced the frontier and claimed her place in it. The future would bring new challenges. The ranch would demand everything from her, again and again. But Clara had learned something essential during her time here, that she was strong enough to meet those challenges. Not because she never failed or never doubted, but because she'd proven to herself that she could fail and doubt and still keep moving forward. That was the real victory. Not conquering the land or becoming perfect, but learning to trust herself even when the path ahead was unclear. Cole kissed the top of her head. Ready to go inside? Clara took one last look at the snow-covered land, at the ranch she'd built from desperation into something solid and lasting. Yeah, I'm ready. They went inside together, closing the door against the cold, leaving footprints in the fresh snow that would be covered by morning but would be made again the next day, and the day after that, in the endless work of building a life worth living. And that, Clara thought, as Cole built up the fire and she settled into the warmth of their home, was exactly as it should be. Not perfect, not easy, but real and earned and entirely her own. The life she'd chosen, the life she'd fought for, the life she'd keep building, one day at a time, for as long as she had breath in her body and work in her hands and land stretching toward mountains that no longer felt like barriers but like home.